Northern Utah is a land of stark beauty, where endless fields meet dense forests, and the silence is broken only by the distant hum of highway traffic. In this quiet stretch, small towns cling to routine, their residents lulled by the comfort of familiarity. But beneath the surface, shadows linger, unspoken stories whispered among neighbors, strange occurrences dismissed as superstition. On the outskirts, a solitary home stands at the edge of civilization, its windows reflecting the encroaching wilderness. Tonight, we begin our investigation into what lies beyond those walls, where ordinary life unravels into something far more disturbing. It was just another evening in the quiet town, the kind where routine errands offer a sense of comfort. I left my house as dusk settled, the streets bathed in a pale, silvery light. The grocery store glowed softly at the end of the lane, its windows reflecting the emptiness outside. Yet, beneath the calm, there was something almost imperceptible, a faint unease that clung to the air, as if the town itself was holding its breath. No one could have guessed that behind the ordinary, something deeply unsettling was beginning to stir. It was late in the evening when I first noticed him, a man standing motionless at the end of the aisle, his eyes fixed on me with a cold, unwavering stare. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist as I moved between the shelves. Each time I turned a corner, he was there, silent and unblinking, his presence growing heavier with every step. The store was nearly empty, yet the distant hum of the security cameras felt suddenly intrusive, as if recording something it shouldn't. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but the dread in my chest told a different story. Why was he watching me, and what did he want? As I stepped out into the cold, dimly lit parking lot, a familiar figure caught my eye. The same man from inside the store stood motionless, his hands empty, gaze fixed on me from across the rows of silent cars. The air felt heavier, as if every sound was muffled beneath an unseen pressure. I tried to dismiss the growing unease, but his presence lingered, unwavering. Was it mere coincidence, or had I become the focus of something far more sinister? Night had settled over the quiet countryside, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow every familiar shape. As I pulled into my driveway, the silence was almost suffocating, broken only by the distant rustle of wind through the trees. I was halfway through locking the door when I noticed it. A truck, old and battered, parked just beyond the edge of my property. Its headlights were off, but the engine was still warm, sending faint plumes of exhaust into the cold air. No one was inside, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. What would compel someone to wait in the shadows, so close to my home, and why tonight of all nights? As midnight crept across the quiet town, I remained inside, eyes fixed on the unmoving truck parked beneath the flickering street lamp. The engine was silent, its windows dark, and yet a strange unease began to settle in my chest. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing more than a weary traveler pausing for the night, perhaps lost, or simply seeking rest. But the longer I watched, the more the silence pressed in, broken only by the distant hum of insects. Was it truly harmless, or was something waiting in the darkness just beyond my sight? It was just past midnight when a sudden creak echoed through the silent house, jolting me awake. The air felt colder than usual, heavy with the tension that pressed against the walls. As I peered into the dimly lit hallway, A shadow flickered across the floor, its movement too deliberate to be dismissed as a trick of the light. For a moment, I could not tell if the presence lingered inside my home or just beyond the threshold, blurring the boundaries between safety and the unknown. What exactly had crossed my path that night, and why did it feel as though the house itself was holding its breath? In the dim glow of the upstairs hallway, the narrator whispers into the phone, voice trembling as they relay their address to the dispatcher. Every word is punctuated by the slow, deliberate creak of footsteps on the floorboards below, a chilling reminder that someone or something is moving through the house. The silence between each footfall grows heavier, amplifying the sense of isolation and helplessness. Outside, the night remains eerily still, as if the world itself is holding its breath. With the police en route, the only certainty is that the intruder has not yet revealed their intentions. The silence of the night was shattered by the sudden arrival of police sirens, their blue lights flickering against the frostbitten windows. Officers rushed onto the scene, catching the intruder as he darted toward a battered truck parked in the shadows. It was the same man seen earlier in the store, his face twisted in a grin that seemed to linger even as he was restrained. For the first time, the threat was no longer a distant rumor. It was tangible, immediate, and terrifyingly personal. As the man was led away, witnesses couldn't shake the feeling that something far darker had just slipped through their town, leaving more questions than answers. The intruder's presence was chilling, but what followed was even more perplexing. Despite being armed, he left without stealing a single item, ignoring valuables scattered throughout the house. Police reports detail the scene: drawers left open, footsteps in the dust, but nothing missing. Investigators and the family alike are haunted by the question: if not theft, then what compelled him to break in? As the days pass, the silence grows heavier, and the true motive remains shrouded in darkness. It was late autumn when I set out alone, the road winding through endless stretches of silent, leafless woods. As miles slipped by, the landscape grew colder, the trees thinning until only skeletal branches remained against a gray sky. Each passing mile seemed to swallow the last traces of civilization, leaving only the hum of tires and the distant echo of my own breath. The GPS led me deeper into isolation, promising a remote cabin nestled far from prying eyes. By the time I arrived, dusk had fallen, and the world outside felt impossibly distant, almost as if I had crossed some invisible threshold. The cabin stands alone, nestled at the edge of a dense line of pine trees that seem to whisper in the wind. Its driveway, a winding trail of gravel, crunches beneath cautious footsteps, echoing through the stillness of the forest. Though recently renovated, the structure's isolation is palpable, its fresh paint unable to mask the unsettling silence that surrounds it. Locals say the woods here swallow sound, leaving only the distant creak of branches and the uneasy feeling that someone, or something, might be watching. As dusk settles, the shadows grow longer, and the cabin's windows reflect nothing but the darkness beyond. It was just past midnight when an unexpected knock echoed through the silent house. The narrator, still unpacking, hesitated before answering. On the threshold stood a man, his eyes shadowed and his smile too wide, claiming to be the host. There was something off about him. A sour, metallic odor clung to his clothes, and his voice seemed to linger in the air long after he spoke. As the narrator invited him inside, unease settled in, raising the question, was this truly the host, or had something else found its way in? Moments after the first encounter, the silence of the night is shattered by a second, deliberate knock. The man stands at the threshold once more, his expression unchanged, yet his insistence on entry grows unnervingly intense. The narrator describes a creeping sense of dread, as if the air itself thickens with something unspoken and malignant. Police reports later note the inexplicable chill that seemed to envelop the house during these minutes. What compels a stranger to return so persistently, and why does the atmosphere feel so profoundly disturbed? The answer, it seems, remains just beyond reach. Moments after denying the stranger entry, the silence in the house grew heavier, as if pressing against the walls. The narrator, heart pounding, approached the door only to find it empty. No trace of footsteps, no lingering shadow. Yet, as they turned, a pair of eyes glinted from the darkness outside, peering through the window with an unnatural stillness. Panic surged, the air thick with dread, as the realization set in. The man had not left, and his gaze was fixed, unblinking, on the room within. What compelled him to remain, and how did he vanish so quickly from the doorstep? As the intruder rattled the door, the narrator's trembling hands dialed 911, voice barely above a whisper. Dispatch assured help was on the way, but every second stretched unbearably long. When authorities arrived, they quickly contacted the real host, who confirmed he had never sent anyone to the house. The man at the door was an imposter, his identity and motives shrouded in uncertainty. To this day, no one knows what he truly wanted, or how he knew exactly where to find them. It was meant to be a peaceful escape, a spring break retreat deep in the northern woods of Minnesota. The family arrived at a secluded cabin, surrounded by towering pines and the lingering chill of early. The air was quiet, almost unnaturally so, broken only by the distant keel of a loon on the lake. Inside, laughter and warmth pushed back the isolation, but outside, the forest seemed to watch in silence. No one suspected that beneath the tranquil surface, something was waiting, unseen and patient. The first days passed quietly as the family settled into the rhythm of their new life. The cabin, with its creaking floorboards and faded wallpaper, offered a rustic charm that seemed to promise tranquility. Outside, the dense forest wrapped around them like a silent guardian, its stillness broken only by the distant call of an owl. For a while, the isolation felt comforting, a welcome escape from the noise of the city. Yet, beneath the peaceful surface, something in the woods watched and waited, its presence barely perceptible, at least for now. The night was unusually quiet, the only sound the gentle crackle of the fire pit at my feet. Shadows stretched long across the yard, pressing in from the dense forest beyond. Then, without warning, a sharp metallic echo rang out from the darkness, so sudden and unnatural that my breath caught in my throat. The silence that followed felt heavier, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I strained to listen, wondering if I was truly alone, or if something unseen had just announced its presence. As midnight crept over the silent woods, a sudden barrage of violent knocks shattered the uneasy calm inside the cabin. Each blow against the door echoed with a force that seemed almost inhuman, rattling the fragile sense of safety. Through a narrow window, the narrator caught a fleeting glimpse. A man stood just beyond the threshold, his face obscured by shadow, gripping a heavy axe with unsettling intent. The air grew colder, as if the darkness itself pressed closer, suffocating the room with dread. What compelled this stranger to appear at such an hour, and what did he want behind that locked door? Inside the cabin, the family huddled together, breaths shallow, as the relentless pounding on the door echoed through the darkness. Furniture was stacked desperately against the entrance, each thud threatening to splinter the fragile barrier between safety and terror. When the police finally arrived, they found the cabin eerily silent. The intruder vanished without a trace. Deep gouges and claw marks scarred the wood, silent testimony to the violence that had unfolded. Yet, no footprints led away from the scene, and no explanation could account for the chilling evidence left behind. As dawn broke over the silent woods, the attacker had already vanished, leaving behind no trace but a trail of fear. The authorities scoured the forest, yet found nothing. No footprints, no discarded weapon, not even a hint of who he was or why he chose this family. The cabin, once a place of refuge, now stood abandoned, its windows boarded and its rooms echoing with memories of terror. For the family, the ordeal became a shadow that followed them, a puzzle with missing pieces and no hope of resolution. To this day, the forest remains quiet, but locals whisper that something still lingers among the trees, waiting, watching, and never truly gone. It was a bitterly cold evening, the kind where silence settles over the town like a heavy blanket. The family inside was winding down, the glow of their living room offering a fragile sense of warmth against the winter darkness. Then, without warning, a knock echoed through the house. Standing on the porch was a stranger, his breath visible in the frigid air, his eyes searching. He asked for someone by name, a name no one in the household recognized. The air grew tense, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. It was just past midnight when I stepped out of the taxi, the silence of the winter night pressing in from all sides. As I made my way up the driveway, something caught my eye. Fresh footprints, stark and deliberate, trailing from the roadside directly toward my front porch. The prints were too large to be mine, and their crisp edges suggested they were made only moments before. I followed them with growing unease, watching as they veered off and vanished into the dense black woods behind the house. Who had been here, and why did they leave so suddenly? The answer, for now, remained buried in the darkness. As the narrator clutches the phone, relaying desperate whispers to the dispatcher, a sudden, violent thud reverberates through the silent house. The sound is unmistakable, wood splintering under force, echoing from the back door. Each strike grows louder, more frenzied, as if the intruder is fueled by something beyond ordinary malice. The narrator's breath catches, heart pounding, as the realization dawns. The threat is no longer distant. It is here, clawing at the threshold, determined to breach the fragile barrier between safety and terror. What waits beyond that door remains unseen, its intentions shrouded in darkness. With trembling hands, the narrator sprinted through the silent night, the echo of hurried footsteps trailing behind. Reaching the safety of their car, they locked the doors, heart pounding as distant sirens pierced the darkness. When police arrived, they found shattered glass and deep scratches along the window frame, clear evidence of a violent attempt to break in. Yet, despite a thorough search of the property and surrounding woods, there was no trace of the intruder. The only thing left behind was an unsettling silence, as if something, or someone, had vanished into thin air. To this day, the identity of the stranger remains unknown. Investigators combed through records and eyewitness accounts, but no trace was ever found. The motives behind the chilling encounter are left to speculation, deepening the sense of unresolved fear that lingers in the quiet corners of the town. It is a stark reminder that danger does not always announce itself. It can arrive without warning, shattering the illusion of safety on even the most ordinary of days. And as night falls, residents still wonder if the threat has truly vanished, or if it waits unseen in the shadows. It began with subtle disturbances, doors left ajar, lights flickering in empty rooms, and the feeling of being watched on otherwise uneventful afternoons. Across small towns and quiet suburbs, these incidents followed a chilling pattern. Ordinary days unraveling into nightmares as unfamiliar faces appeared on the periphery, their intentions masked by sinister smiles. Police reports document the sudden disappearances and unexplained noises that plagued these communities, while eyewitnesses recall the unnerving sensation of time slowing, as if reality itself were warping. Each intrusion seemed random, yet the similarities grew impossible to ignore. What connects these strangers, and why do they choose the most unsuspecting moments to strike? Each encounter etched itself into the narrator's mind, leaving behind a residue of unease that seeped into everyday life. Sleep became elusive, replaced by restless nights, haunted by the memory of sinister smiles glimpsed in the dark. Even in moments of quiet, there was a constant sense of being watched, a hypervigilance that dulled the comfort of familiar places. Friends noticed the change, an anxious glance over the shoulder, a hesitation before entering empty rooms. Yet, despite every effort to reclaim normalcy, the feeling of vulnerability lingered, as if something unseen was always just out of sight. Despite exhaustive investigations, the identities of the men remain unknown. Their motives, shrouded in secrecy, have left families and authorities grasping for answers that never come. Eyewitnesses recall the feeling of being watched, a presence lingering just beyond the reach of light. Police reports detail patterns, but no clear connection or explanation ever emerges. As the final pages of the case file are turned, one question echoes in the silence. How long had they been among us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for their moment?